The sun was setting behind the hills when Ye, a beautiful and wealthy woman, stared into the mirror, wondering how her life had come to this. She had always believed love was something that would bring happiness, but now, her marriage was filled with silence, mystery, and fear. Kwame, her husband, had once been the envy of every man. Tall, dark, and handsome, he moved through the world with a grace that caught everyone's attention. But there was something about him that people didn't know, something hidden beneath his charming smile. He wasn't like the other men, and deep down, Ye felt it. When she first rejected him years ago, Kwame was nothing but a struggling man trying to find his place in the world. Ye had humiliated him, publicly dismissing his advances, calling him unworthy of someone like her. He never forgot that day, the day she laughed in his face in front of the whole village. Years passed, and Kwame vanished. No one knew where he went, or what happened to him. Then, out of nowhere, he returned as a man of means. He had wealth and power, and now everyone wanted to be associated with him. Ye, who once rejected him, found herself in a different situation. She needed a man who could match her wealth and her beauty. And Kwame, with his newfound fortune, seemed like the perfect choice. But something had changed in him. When Ye accepted his proposal, she didn't know she had fallen into a carefully laid trap. Kwame smiled when she said yes, but behind that smile was the cold fire of revenge. The first few weeks of their marriage were strange. Kwame was distant, often leaving the house without explanation. He would return late at night, and though they shared a bed, there was no warmth between them. Ye could feel the tension growing, but she didn't understand why. Then, one night, everything changed. It was their 4th month as husband and wife. Ye woke up feeling an odd sensation in her body. She reached down to check herself, and a cold wave of shock washed over her. Something was wrong. She tried to move, but there was pain. A strange, tight feeling. She gasped, her heart pounding. Kwame stood in the doorway, watching her. His face was blank, but his eyes, they were cold. "I told you," he whispered, stepping closer to the bed. "You would never reject me again." Ye's mind raced. What was he talking about? What had he done? She tried to get up, but her body betrayed her. Her most intimate place felt like it was locked, sealed shut in a way that defied understanding. Panic rose in her chest as she looked at him, searching for answers. "Do you feel it?" Kwame asked, his voice smooth but filled with malice. "The lock, it's there. And it will stay. You will never feel pleasure again. No man will ever touch you, not even me." Tears welled up in Ye's eyes as the realization of his words hit her. "What have you done to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Kwame chuckled softly, as if he had waited for this moment for years. "This is what you deserve, Ye. You humiliated me, and made me feel less of a man. I was nothing to you, just someone you could step on. But now, I own you. I own your body, your soul, and your happiness." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You will suffer in silence, just like I did. You will starve, just like I did. And no one will ever know." Ye's heart broke as the weight of his words settled over her. The once powerful woman, the one who had everything, now lay helpless before a man who had turned her life into a twisted game. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped in a nightmare, one that only Kwame controlled. As the days passed, Ye tried everything to figure out what had happened. She visited doctors, priests, and anyone who might offer her a way out, but no one could explain what was wrong with her. They all gave her the same confused looks, telling her there was nothing physically wrong. But Ye knew better. Something was very wrong, and Kwame held the key. He watched her with satisfaction, each day growing colder and more distant. His revenge was unfolding perfectly. But there was something more, something even darker lurking in Kwame's eyes whenever he looked at her. In the silence of their home, Ye began to notice strange things about her husband. He never touched her. In fact, he barely looked at her body, as if the very sight of her disgusted him. There were nights he wouldn't come home at all, and when she asked him where he had been, he would only smile and say, "Out with friends." It didn't take long for Ye to realize the truth. Kwame wasn't interested in her. He had never been. This marriage wasn't about love or companionship. It was about control. And Kwame was playing a game she didn't fully understand. But Ye wasn't going to sit back and let him win. She knew there had to be a way out of this nightmare, a way to free herself from whatever strange hold Kwame had over her. The only question was, how? Days turned into weeks, and Ye's torment only deepened. The once lively woman, full of grace and confidence, now lived in fear and confusion. Her body, once a source of pride, had become a prison. No matter how many doctors she visited or how many traditional healers she consulted, no one could understand or undo what Kwame had done. Every night, she tossed and turned, unable to escape the cold reality of her situation. Kwame, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on her suffering. His icy demeanor remained unchanged, but there was a new light in his eyes, a cruel satisfaction that came with each passing day. He rarely spoke to her, but when he did, it was only to remind her of her helplessness. You see, yeah, he would say, standing by the bedroom window, staring out into the night, you thought you were untouchable, that no one could ever hurt you. But I found a way. And no one will ever know. Yeah wanted to fight back, but how could she? She had no proof of what Kwame had done, no explanation for the strange, invisible lock that bound her. It was as if her own body had betrayed her, and she had no one to turn to. Her friends, the women she had once shared laughter and gossip with, began to notice her withdrawal. At first, they thought it was just the pressures of marriage, but as time went on, they saw the change in her, how her vibrant spirit had dimmed. They asked questions, but Ye couldn't tell them the truth. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? And then, one night, something happened that sent chills down her spine. Ye had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she heard the faintest whisper. It was so soft, so quiet, that at first, she thought it was just the wind. But then it came again, more distinct this time. Help, me. She sat up, her heart racing. The voice was coming from within her. She reached down, her hands trembling, and there it was again, a whisper, a faint plea that seemed to echo from the very core of her being. Save me. Panic gripped her. She jumped out of bed, rushing to the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and fearful. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it was just her imagination, but the whispers wouldn't stop. For the next few nights, Ye was haunted by the strange voices. They came in the dead of night, faint and distant, but always there. And with each whisper, her fear grew. What was happening to her? Was she losing her mind? Kwame, of course, remained oblivious, or so she thought. One night, as the whispers grew louder, she turned to see him standing in the doorway, watching her with that same cold smile. You hear it, don't you? He asked, his voice as smooth as silk. It's the sound of your own soul crying out for help. But no one can save you, yeah. Not anymore. She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. What have you done to me, Kwame? She demanded, her voice breaking. Why are you doing this? Kwame stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. You humiliated me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You made me feel like nothing. But now, I have all the power. You see, yeah, I've locked you away, just like you locked me out of your life. And no one will ever free you. Yes, mind raced. There had to be something, some explanation for what was happening. But before she could say anything more, Kwame turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the whispers and the darkness. That night, Ye made a decision. She couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a nightmare she didn't understand. She had to find out what Kwame had done, no matter how dangerous or strange it might be. The next morning, she left the house and went to see an old woman in the village, someone who had once been rumored to deal with the supernatural. Mema Akua was known for her wisdom, but people also whispered that she had powers beyond understanding. Ye had always dismissed such talk as superstition, but now, with no other options, she found herself standing at the old woman's doorstep. Mema Akua greeted her with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting her all along. You come because you feel the chains, don't you? The old woman asked, her voice rough but filled with authority. Ye nodded, her throat tight. Please. I don't know what's happening to me. I need to understand. Mema Akua beckoned her inside, leading her to a small room filled with strange herbs and trinkets. The man you call your husband, she began, he has bound you. Not with physical chains, but with something far more powerful. Yes, heart raced. What do you mean? How did he do this? Mema Akua sat down, her old eyes piercing into yes. Kwame is not what he seems. His heart belongs to the shadows, to desires that he cannot face. He married you not out of love, but out of revenge. And the lock he has placed on you, it is a curse. A curse born out of his own hatred. Ye felt a wave of cold fear wash over her. How do I break it? How do I free myself? The old woman shook her head slowly. Breaking such a curse is not easy. It will require great sacrifice, and even then, the damage may already be done. Ye stared at her, her mind reeling. What do you mean? What kind of sacrifice? Mema Akua's eyes darkened. Your husband, he is bound to this curse as much as you are. If you wish to free yourself, you must confront him, but be warned, doing so will unravel everything. There is no turning back. Yes, heart pounded in her chest. Could she really confront Kwame? Could she face the man who had done this to her? The man who had locked her in this strange, invisible prison? As she left Mama Akua's house, Ye knew there was no other choice. She would have to face Kwame, and whatever dark secrets he had hidden from her. But what she didn't know was that Kwame had been waiting for this moment all along. Ye returned home with a sense of urgency, her mind swirling with the words Mema Akua had spoken. She knew now that Kwame wasn't just a vengeful husband, he was something far more dangerous. His heart was twisted by secrets she could barely comprehend, and the lock he had placed on her was a reflection of his own inner torment. But the solution, as terrifying as it seemed, lay in confronting him. The house was eerily quiet when Ye stepped inside. Kwame's presence was always felt even when he wasn't around, like a dark cloud hanging in the air. Ye didn't know where to start, but she knew she had to be strong. If she faltered, Kwame would tighten his hold on her, perhaps forever. As the evening wore on, Ye heard the familiar sound of Kwame's footsteps approaching the door. She stood in the middle of the room, waiting for him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment everything would change. Kwame entered the house, his usual cold demeanor in place. He barely glanced at her as he walked past, heading toward the kitchen. But Ye wasn't going to let him escape this time. Kwame, she called, her voice trembling slightly but filled with determination. We need to talk. He paused, turning slowly to face her. His eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. About what? Ye took a deep breath, steadying herself. About what you've done to me. About this curse. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a slow, chilling smile spread across Kwame's face. He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, as if savoring the tension in the air. So you finally figured it out, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. I was wondering how long it would take. Ye's hands clenched into fists. Why, Kwame? Why would you do this to me? What have I ever done to deserve this? Kwame's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. You humiliated me, yeah. You thought you were better than me, laughed at me, rejected me in front of everyone. I was nothing to you, just some poor man you could mock. But now you understand what it feels like to be powerless. Ye shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, Kwame. I was young and foolish, but this is madness. You're not punishing me, you're destroying both of us. Kwame's expression flickered for a brief second, as if her words had struck something deep within him, but it quickly hardened again. You think this is just about revenge? You think I care about what you feel? No, yeah. This is about control. I have what I've always wanted, power over you. Ye took a step closer, her fear melting into anger. No, Kwame. This isn't power. This is fear. And it's eating you alive. Kwame's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. You don't know anything about me, he hissed. You don't know the kind of life I've had, the things I've done to get where I am. Then tell me, Ye challenged, her voice rising. Tell me what you've done. Tell me why you've shut me out, why you're so consumed with this hatred. For a moment, Kwame was silent, his eyes flickering with something Ye couldn't quite place. And then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he spoke. You want to know why? His voice trembled slightly, a crack in the facade. Because I could never be the man you wanted. I could never be the man any woman wanted. You think this is about you, but it's not. It's about me. About who I am. Ye's heart pounded as the realization dawned on her. Kwame, what are you saying? He looked at her, his eyes filled with a deep, bitter resentment. I'm saying that I've never loved you. I've never loved any woman. I couldn't even if I tried. All these years, I've been pretending, putting on this act. But the truth is, I've always desired something else, someone else. The weight of his confession hung in the air like a heavy fog. Ye stared at him, her mind racing to comprehend what he was saying. Kwame had never loved her, not because of anything she had done, but because he wasn't capable of loving her in the way she had believed. You married me, to punish me for something I had no control over, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Because of your own secrets. Kwame's face twisted with anger. You don't understand. You couldn't possibly understand what it's like to live a lie every day, to hide who you are because the world won't accept you. I wanted to hurt you because you represented everything I couldn't have. Yes, chest tightened. She had spent months thinking Kwame's cruelty was rooted in revenge for her rejection, but it was deeper than that. His hatred wasn't just for her, it was for himself. He had locked her up, not just to punish her, but because he couldn't face the truth of his own desires. Tears streamed down Ye's face as she stared at the man she had once loved, now a stranger before her. Kwame, you're hurting yourself as much as you're hurting me. This lock you've put on me, it's a reflection of the lock you've put on your own heart. Kwame's face contorted in rage, and he stepped closer, his fists clenched. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Ye. You don't know what it's like. But Ye didn't back down. I know you're afraid, Kwame. I know you feel trapped. But punishing me won't free you. It won't change who you are. For a moment, Kwame seemed to waver, his eyes searching hers for something, maybe understanding, maybe forgiveness. But then, just as quickly, the cold mask returned. You think you can fix this? Fix me, he spat, his voice filled with venom. You're wrong, Ye. This is who I am. And I'm never undoing what I've done to you. Ye felt her heart break all over again. There would be no reconciliation, no happy ending. Kwame was too far gone, consumed by his own demons. But she wasn't going to let him win. She wasn't going to let him control her any longer. You may have locked me, Kwame, she said, her voice steady, but I will find a way to free myself. And when I do, you'll be the one left with nothing. Kwame's face twisted with fury, but before he could respond, Ye turned and walked out the door, her heart pounding but her resolve stronger than ever. The night was dark and cold, but for the first time in months, Ye felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know how she would break the curse, but she knew she would. And when she did, Kwame's reign over her would be over. For good.